ECW may not have invented extreme wrestling, but they're the organization most often associated with the word extreme. It's in the name after all. By the year 2000, ECW had been calling itself Extreme for more than 5 years, and in that time had proved to be highly influential on other promotions both large and small, particularly when it came to pushing the envelope and upping the ante of violence. ECW may have been the wrestling brand most associated with the Extreme, but by no means did they have the market cornered on that loose principle. In fact, when a promotion with a few similar ideals popped up in California in the summer of 1999, they eventually managed to draw the ire of their East Coast counterpart. Eventually, parties from both sides engaged in a rather unusual confrontation one night in Los Angeles. In the summer of 1999, adult film producer Robert Zacchari, better known by the stage name Rob Black, formed the Los Angeles-based XPW, Extreme Pro Wrestling. On July 31st of that year, 1 month shy of ECW bringing their wares to the national TV stage, XPW ran its first event in Reseda, California. Very quickly, XPW established its identity, relying heavily on disturbing brutality, as well as, shall we say, extreme adult themes, which the company founder was well versed in from his other career. That first card was basically what you'd come to expect from XPW, as local mainstays such as Supreme, Homeless Jimmy, and White Trash Johnny Webb occupied the same space as one-time ECW performers such as Big Dick Dudley and Nicole Bass. Over time, more ECW alumni made the trip to the West Coast, including the Pitbulls, former Eliminator John Cronus, and the Public Enemy. By the spring of 2000, XPW was fixing to start holding shows in the Los Angeles Sports Arena, home of WrestleManias 2 and 7. By then, they'd fleshed out a more than impressive roster of talents, including more ECW alums in the form of Axl Rotten, Chris Candido, and Shane Douglas, the latter of whom was in limbo with WCW following the Radicals' jump to the WWF. Complementing these recognizable veterans were younger wrestlers with varying degrees of potential, such as eventual deathmatch god The Messiah, affable throwback Dynamite D, and the swaggering, highly athletic Kid Chaos. It wasn't ECW, but to some fans, it may have reminded them enough of ECW to give it a chance. If sex, violence, and a brazen glut of decadence were what you wanted, XPW could at least sate your appetite on those fronts. Those on the ECW side of the fence noted some of the similarities between the two promotions, particularly the name, and that led to some legal wrangling. In April 2000, XPW received a cease and desist from ECW regarding the use of the word extreme in their name. In a statement given at the time, Rob Black laughed off ECW's threats of further recourse by saying, "There are other federations that have extreme in their name, but why isn't Paulie going after them? It's more of a personal thing. He's offended." This wasn't Black's first run-in of any sort with Heyman. Prior to XPW's formation, Black had attended a number of ECW cards in the late 90s and had become well acquainted with some of the principals there. References to Black's production company Extreme Associates even made it onto ECW events, as wrestler Danny Doring wore a shirt depicting its logo at the 1999 Guilty as Charged pay-per-view, which he said he was simply asked to wear and wasn't even his. According to XPW Vice President Kevin Kleinrock, Black was apparently looking to get involved in the wrestling industry and had reportedly talked with Heyman about working together, likely to bring an expansion-minded ECW to the West Coast. As this version of events goes, things ultimately fell through in the spring of 1999 amid ECW's negotiations with TNN, during which Heyman allegedly disassociated himself from Black due to Black's connections to the adult film industry. With Heyman out of the picture, Black worked with Kleinrock and others to begin putting together XPW. Aside from issues over the name, more legal issues between the sides began to brew, concerning the contractual status of one of ECW's most recognizable names, Sabu. The death-defying veteran left ECW that March, reportedly after refusing to put over Super Crazy in the quarterfinals of the tournament to crown a new television champion. Sabu then tried to work elsewhere, but found resistance from Heyman, who tried holding on to the terms of the contract he walked out on. In one instance, Heyman reportedly prevented him from headlining one of Insane Clown Posse's wrestling tours. Sabu did manage to wrestle for XPW's first event at the LA Sports Arena on April 16th, taking the fall in a triple threat match involving fellow ECW peers Candido and Douglas. The Wrestling Observer noted that XPW found a creative way around Sabu's apparent non-compete by saying Sabu worked the match for free. Thus, he wasn't technically in breach of contract. The match occurred roughly a week after ECW initiated that legal action against XPW over the extreme portion of their name, so Heyman probably wasn't feeling all that warm and fuzzy toward Black over his using Sabu in that manner. It was around this time that the short-lived WOW magazine posted an antagonistic letter from Black to Heyman, which XPW sent to the publication. Perhaps it's not quite the same as taking out a full-page ad in a major newspaper, but it's also probably not even the strangest part of this total story. Further issues ensued when both promotions were set to be involved in an FMW show the following month. Sabu, who was by this time XPW's champion, wrestled Mr. Ganosuke, while Heyman refused to send wrestlers New Jack and Balls Mahoney as originally intended. While Heyman did give the blessing for FMW to use Sabu, as he was still brandishing about Sabu's apparently valid ECW contract, he reportedly told FMW that he wouldn't be party to any event in which XPW was also involved. These weren't banner times by any means for ECW. They were already dealing with the Mike Awesome fiasco, in which the reigning ECW champion jumped ship to WCW in another bit of murky legalese. Other weary talents were either leaving the promotion, such as Lance Storm, or at least considering making a move, as bounced or withheld paychecks continued to be the ECW norm. They were also months away from losing their national TV outlet on TNN to the WWF, and the writing looked to be on the wall. But that didn't stop the attempts at deeper national expansion. Once confined mostly to the northeastern US, ECW would thrust its touring loop further outward, holding pay-per-views in places like Birmingham, Alabama and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, while venturing to very new places such as Kansas, Missouri and Minnesota for TV tapings. ECW's western expansion only looked to continue as summer approached, and soon enough they chose a very, very westerly point for their July pay-per-view. Given the animosity discussed so far, you can probably figure out what location Heyman's company picked. In June, ECW formally announced that Heatwave would take place in Los Angeles' Grand Olympic Auditorium, marking the furthest west that ECW had ever gone without crossing the Pacific into Japan anyway. While it can certainly be argued that an ECW bent on total national presence needed to hit up California sooner or later, the timing was definitely curious. Only 2 months had passed since the ill feelings between ECW and XPW spilled over into a legal setting, and now the East Coast trendsetter was theoretically treading on the turf of a heated rival. In the eyes of Kleinrock, this was the perfect opportunity to score a bit of publicity at ECW's expense, even if it meant paying for the price of admission. Kleinrock claims that he was the one who stood in line bright and early to purchase 6 front-row tickets on Black's dime, as well as a row of balcony tickets for XPW wrestlers and other personnel to attend Heatwave. He goes on to say that there was nothing malicious about XPW's intended presence, as the company attendees would simply be wearing company t-shirts, and that some of the street crew members would be flyering outside the venue. XPW had a major event scheduled for 6 nights later at the LA Sports Arena entitled Go Funk Yourself. Headlined by Sabu defending the championship against, of course, Terry Funk, so a little subversive advertising from the local promotion made sense. If it's true that that's all that XPW was doing, it sounds pretty harmless all round. While it may be a bit irksome for ECW to see a rival promotion, one that they've initiated legal action against no less, use their pay-per-view to advertise an upcoming event, it's not like they were actively disrupting ECW's production. If only things could have been that simple. With word getting around that XPW personnel would be attending the event, Black apparently assured an acquaintance of his who worked for ECW that there would be no problems caused by the XPW contingent. Given the level of heat between the promotions, ECW understandably had little inclination to believe him. The XPW horde that was to sit at ringside consisted of Messiah, Supreme, Homeless Jimmy, Kid Chaos, Valet Christy Mist, and announcer Chris Kloss. If the plan was to be noticed on camera, they kinda failed, because the six were situated on the side with the hard cam. A standard shot of the ring put the XPW talents just out of camera range. Others, including Dynamite D, Kleinrock, and various crew members, were scattered in various places through the building. Black was not in attendance. On the day of the event, security was on the lookout for all things XPW related. ECW valet Jasmine St. Clair, as well as a local musician named Doc Marley, both of whom worked for XPW previously, pointed out XPW's wrestlers and staffers as they entered the Grand Olympic Auditorium. Those wearing XPW shirts were forced to turn them inside out before they were permitted into the arena. Signs promoting XPW were also banned, though a few did make it through the attempted filtering. At worst, smatterings of XPW chants could be heard at points, particularly due to the recognition of Supreme in the front row by local fans. The only real noticeable incident prior to the main event occurred when Rhino, after retaining his television title against the Sandman, mockingly drank one of his opponent's beers before flinging the can in the hard camera's direction. Some of the drink spritzed toward the XPW attendees, prompting Supreme to yell at Rhino, which the man-beast seemed to ignore. For most of the night, outside of some light XPW acknowledgements and Rhino inadvertently causing a small stir among the guests, nothing of note really happened. But then came the main event. ECW champion Just Incredible, seconded by Francine, was going to defend his title against Tommy Dreamer in a Stairway to Hell match, where a coiled-up strand of barbed wire hung from the ceiling. Both combatants made their entrances, and the bell sounded to begin the match. The camera was trained on the two men in the midst of a stare-down when crowd noise began picking up, and referee Jim Malino noticed something happening away from the focal point. Seeing what Malino was seeing, Dreamer moved past Credible to where a disturbance was taking place at ringside, near the XPW patrons. XPW wrestler Messiah later stated, "We were all looking at each other like Rob is gonna be pissed off because he spent all this money on front row seats and the shirts didn't get on. The main event came, and we said if we're gonna do it, let's do it now. So we did. We showed our shirts." Off camera, Francine had confronted Mist, who had just removed her own shirt to reveal a bikini top underneath, getting the expected reaction from the ECW faithful. Francine was reportedly upset, as there was a planned spot in the main event where she'd end up losing her top, so Mist's actions may have scooped a little bit of her heat. But where things got especially serious was in what happened next. The route of the altercation wasn't clear to those at a distance. Some thought that Mist had somehow grabbed or shoved Francine, leading to Francine shoving back and knocking her down. A different version of events claims that when security initially went to intervene on the ringside situation, a security guard had knocked Heavyweight Supreme into Mist, causing her to fall. Francine has since gone on record claiming that nobody from XPW laid a hand on her. Security and Dreamer intervened on the apparent skirmish, leading to the ECW locker room emptying out as scores of wrestlers and crew members hit ringside. Though nobody in the group knew exactly what had gone down, it was standard procedure for the boys to quickly step in during chaotic situations involving their peers such as this. Without asking questions, the horde came charging through the curtain. All the cameras really pick up from the confrontation was Ronnie Lang of Atlas Security pulling Kid Chaos away from ringside, while the other XPW wrestlers stand off with the ECW crew. Some of the visible wrestlers were bare-chested or in undershirts, as they were either in the midst of reversing their XPW shirts before putting them back on, or, as Messiah claimed in a 2001 interview, they were physically torn off them. For ECW's part, announcer Joey Styles didn't even acknowledge XPW or even a local wrestling outfit. Instead, he chalked the altercation up to some drunken knucklehead likely grabbing Francine, while completely no-selling the presence of the opposition. Had it all ended there, it'd have been headline fodder as it was, local indie group kicked out of pay-per-view of promotion they're currently at odds with following minor disturbance, that kind of thing. But of course, it didn't end there. Messiah claimed that while he and his XPW cohorts were being escorted out, he was struck upside the head by an irate Heyman. He adds that Heyman spit on both he and Chaos and tried to goad them into taking a swing at him. Messiah claims that several members of the LAPD were present when Heyman supposedly issued that dare, so the XPW wrestlers balked at fighting back. In fact, most reports indicate that the XPWers, after the initial skirmish, didn't really resist being taken out of the auditorium. Once outside the building, however, the situation only escalated. Kleinrock remembers going outside before the main event with the crew members, taking their places to hand out flyers for XPW's big event in 6 nights. That's when he was surprised when the doors flew open and out came Heyman, the security team, and the ejected XPW crew. Accounts vary as to what exactly happened outside the auditorium, particularly when it comes to numbers and specific actions. Some sources claim that an estimated 20 ECW representatives began beating down some of the XPW crew members in what was apparently a one-sided battle. Those throwing punches from the ECW side reportedly included Mikey Whipwreck, New Jack, Roadkill, Heyman himself, the super heavyweight Sally Graziano, bodyguard of the Full-Blooded Italians, among others. No arrests were made, which was quite surprising, seeing as officers from the LAPD, the ones already present in the arena, watched the whole incident go down. No additional officers were called in to deal with the brawl, and it came to an end when the XPW contingent retreated in a limousine. Meanwhile, back inside the building, Credible defeated Dreamer to retain his championship. Hours after Heatwave ended, XPW posted a press release to their website, professing innocence in the whole matter, and even writing at one point that the staffers who were seated in the balcony section could have easily bombarded entering wrestlers with drinks, food, signs, etc., or even cut the ECW banner, but did not. Well, that was certainly sporting of them. XPW ended the press release by writing, "It is well known that ECW and XPW are currently in a legal battle over both the XPW name and XPW's use of Sabu as the result of a lawsuit served on XPW by ECW. XPW regrets having to pursue legal action of our own. This situation certainly warrants both legal action and the filing of criminal charges. The attacks both inside and out of the arena were physically unprovoked and excessive." Black further addressed the situation on an ensuing episode of XPW television, reiterating much of the press release. He ranted at Heyman over both the Heatwave incident and the previous legal action, while also taking shots at ECW's deteriorating financial situation and promised that a lawsuit was coming. Nothing official was ever filed regarding the Heatwave incident, according to a note in the Wrestling Observer, and additionally, Heyman's prior legal maneuverings never came to resolution. At the end of Black's rant, he vowed that XPW would be around a lot longer than ECW, and in one sense, he was right. Come April of 2001, ECW's parent company, the HHG Corporation, filed for bankruptcy, nearly $7.5 million in debt. By the time of the filing, Heyman and a few ECW notables had already found refuge in the WWF. And XPW lasted for 2 years beyond ECW's original lifetime. In 2002, they went so far as to bring their operations to Philadelphia and the ECW arena itself. Shane Douglas was instituted as face of the East Coast invasion, and a host of ECW alums joined the roster, many of which were in the ECW locker room the night of that fateful heatwave. But that stage of XPW's lifetime and the, let's say, friends they made in the Philadelphia wrestling scene of the day is a story for another video. After months of tension, hostility, and choice words, all we really have to show for the squabble between the two extreme promotions, one with an E and one with an X, is an ugly altercation only slightly picked up by TV cameras, as well as the spread of subjective lore concerning what happened off-camera. The ECW XPW incident felt in many ways like the beginning of something bigger, whether it was retaliation at future events from either side, or more courtroom drama, or otherwise. Instead of being a harbinger, the moment marked the peak of the animosity, with no grander fireworks to follow. In a sense, that's kind of how all extreme wrestling sometimes works. Something insane happens and you wonder how in the hell they're gonna top it, and then they don't. We would like to extend special thanks to both Kevin Kleinrock and Danny Doring for additional information during the production of this episode.